This week we're going to be talking about how to proofread or help a student learn how to proofread without crossing the tutoring line. So a common question we hear is, can you proofread this for me? Students may expect tutors to fix every error, to quickly mark all edits on the paper, to smile and say, it's perfect now, to proofread the paper for them. But oftentimes that's not the case. Proofreading may actually mean, from a student's perspective, what do you think of my ideas? Have I supported my point? Does it flow? I make this distinction because it's important for us to know that if a student says, can you proofread this for me? That you as a tutor don't say, no, I can't do that for you, but perhaps you'll ask them, what do you mean by proofreading? Besides, by fixing all small errors, you might be changing the writer's voice. And this is something we definitely don't want to do. How can you be helpful? Be honest about your own grammatical limitations. Treat each error with curiosity. There is likely more than one way to say it. Don't pick out every mistake, look for patterns. Encourage the use of spell check, but do not rely on it. It's not always correct. Consult the handbook and teach students how to use it. Continue to develop your own skills. As tutors, you should constantly be testing your own grammar and your own ways of explaining things and looking things up so that you can familiarize yourself with the resources we have and help students find them themselves. Final editing belongs to the writer. Prioritize what will be addressed with the writer. Maybe sexist language is more important than comma splices. Talk about proofreading with the writer. Is it necessary for the draft he or she is working with? If it's an early draft, maybe not. When using different handbooks, some may disagree. Ask the student to make the choice about which definition to use. And this is pretty common, especially with commas. You'll find that there are varying ways to use commas. There are very clear, correct ways to use a comma, but there's also stylistic commas, and ultimately the choice is up to the student. Techniques. Explain how you find errors. For example, do you read aloud? Explain suggestion by using I statements for the writer's intended meaning. When you change tenses, it sounds like you mean compare strong and weak examples. This is one of my favorite things to point out to students. If you find a really good, strong sentence, use that sentence as an example for the rest of the paper when you come across a sentence that isn't as strong. Identify repetitive errors and have students make the changes. This is important because students eventually need to learn how to find their own errors. And if they're making repetitive ones, sometimes this makes it easier for them to find the errors if they know that they make the mistake over and over again. And finally, you're not a grammar god. Show the student that it is okay to look things up. Now let's talking about crossing the tutoring line. What happens when you've crossed the line? Working well with the student has turned into that student hanging on your every word. The session no longer seems productive. You're uneasy because you seem to be doing all the work. When did it happen and how did you fix it? So how can you tell you've crossed the tutoring line? You sense it. You've been talking the whole time. You haven't spoken enough. The writer appears bored or disinterested. At the end of the session, you're tired while the writer is refreshed. Body language. The writer is leaning away from you. No or little eye contact. These are things you're going to become familiar with as you're tutoring, but I recall saying during one of our earlier meetings that if you're tired, you're doing way too much for the student. So sometimes you just want to help too much. Common error, we like to be helpful as tutors. The fix. Give a candid response of the strengths and weaknesses of the work in progress. Be sensitive to the student's reactions. Suggest ways to enhance the strengths and minimize the weaknesses in the student's writing. Recognize that every text and every writer is a work in progress. Change your tutoring role, shapeshift, or remember those different hats that you're supposed to wear as a tutor. This will help you draw the line between help and hindering a student. We definitely don't want to do that. We're creating independent learners here. Always recall that in the back of your mind as you're working with the student. The over sessions, the brainstorm. When you find yourself coming up with all of the good ideas, over empathizing, letting the student take too much time to explain his or her entire literary experiences. Overwhelming. The tutor, though thorough, bogs the student down with too much advice. Overtaking. The tutor makes the project his or her own. The fix. Stop whatever has made the session unproductive. Too much talking, too much listening. Stop whatever it is you're doing that is making it ineffective. You're not a counselor. Say this. Stop at each paragraph and discuss only those changes or suggestions. Ask the writer about the pace and direction of the session. Follow the writer's lead. Well, that's it for this session. There's a reading that goes directly with what I've summarized here, so I hope you enjoyed the short video.